Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Red Text Podcast. My name is Voga, and I am Voga Illumisente on Instagram.
And I am Rai, aka the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram.
And today we have such a special guest. This one is probably the worst person I have ever met in my entire life. And this is kind of like a full circle moment because this is how we actually initially met. This is where we met, is on the podcast. But she has become one of my bestest friends. She is awful. You'll smell her before you see her. We we have Francisco, who is the Wicked Witch of LA on Instagram. But actually, you're going through a rebrand soon, so I want you to mention your rebrand because by the time this episode airs, I think your rebrand will actually be live. So
that's right.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and all that stuff?
Sure. So my name is Francisco, currently going by the Wicked Witch LA since I started this current Instagram journey. And yeah, this is literally how we met, which was over a year ago now, right?
Almost 2 years ago.
We're going on almost 2 years since we've met. Voga is very right when she says that I'm one of the most awful people that she's ever met. Like attracts like, so it makes perfect sense.
That's right.
So yeah, like Voga was saying, I'm currently going through a rebrand. It's been a long time coming, and I've been feeling it since it was around the time that Voga and I actually met that I felt that title of the Wicked Witch of LA dying out, but I never really gave it the time to actually sit on it, manifest it, what I want that name to be, what I want that image to be like. And it kind of came down to the name that I'm going to go by on Instagram. I wanted to reflect who I am as a practitioner, as a devotee of La Santa Muerte, and who I am as a Mexican. So that name is going to be revealed very soon. It'll come out. It's nothing crazy or extravagant, but it is going to be different, and it's going to be a lot more aligned to who I am as a queer Mexican practitioner.
You can go ahead and announce it because by the time this comes out, your rebrand is gonna be done. This is probably going to be coming out within the next 2 weeks, so you can actually put it out there.
So I'm still juggling on the names, kind of. I'm kind of fixated on one already. Voga's already heard them. So originally I wanted to go by the Child of Scythe as a devotee of La Santa Muerte, but the more oh my god, my cat's going crazy. The more I thought about it, I kind of wanted my name to be in Spanish because that's kind of the majority of the community that I serve, that I associate with. So the name is most likely going to be El Brujo de la Guadaña, which is the Witch of the Scythe.
So cunt. I'm very excited for your rebrand because Wicked Witch of LA doesn't work for you because you're a dirty transplant. And That's always tell people that all the time, is that because the bitch is not even from LA. So Wicked Witch of LA is not suiting for you. So I'm really happy that you're doing the rebrand because I hate dirty transplants like you.
Yeah. And I hate dirty LA, so it works.
LA is disgusting.
Yeah, LA is disgusting. And the people that are from here. Oh my god.
Yeah. Sticky city, sticky people.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm very excited for your rebrand. It's going to be really cunt. It's some of our friends have started using instead of using cunt, we started using clit. So it's like a little bit more cunt. So it's like, this is really clit. I like this. Your new name's going to be super clit.
Gretchen, stop trying to make fetch happen.
Oh, it's gonna happen. Jeez, I'm a trendsetter. I'm Voga Lumicente, for God's sake. Yeah, so I'm really, really excited. But you're right. We met almost 2 years ago. You were on the podcast. We talked about Santa Muerte. I think you were like our fourth episode, I think. So right at the beginning of the podcast. And it was one of the most popular episodes we ever
Yeah.
had, and it's still getting a lot of views. But yeah, that was when we first initially met, and then I eventually met you in person, unfortunately, and we became really good friends.
It was awful. I felt really bad for her, so I felt like I had to be her friend.
Which is so funny that you say that, because now we're business partners, so I don't know what you're talking about. Now we're making money together.
I know.
But yeah, Rye, was this the first time that you had like a conversation with Franny too that day?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think we had ever FaceTimed or anything prior to that episode. We like chatted, but never like actually talked.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was the first proper conversation.
Yeah.
The last 2 years have been kind of wild, especially with the growth of the three of us, the friendship that we've had, and that we've cultivated. Shit has really gone, like, especially here in LA with Francisco and I, because we hang out all the time, and we're now business partners, so we're always doing stuff together. And the growth that we have had in the last 2 years, the glow up that the two of us have had, especially, and then the glow up that Rye and I have had on this pod, like, it's incredible how far we've come since that initial conversation.
So far.
Yeah, it's incredible, and just seeing how your podcast has grown. And I'm not just saying this because I'm your friend. I'm saying this as a true consumer of your podcast. You have one of the best podcasts out there.
Oh, thank you.
It's one of the most genuine. It feels so raw and real. Like, I feel like I trust everything that comes out of your podcast and the people that you bring onto your podcast. And I can't say that about everyone else's.
Thank you, sis. I appreciate that.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, we work really hard for it. But before we get into it, let's do a little check-in. Rye, how are you?
This year's been rocky as shit, but this last week's actually been pretty good. I've done like a lot of traveling and socializing with friends I haven't seen in a hot minute. My partner and I took a day trip to Yosemite on Wednesday, and it was so beautiful. It was his first time, my second time. Most beautiful place on the planet.
Yosemite is really gorgeous.
So fucking gorgeous. And then last night, my partner took me to a belated birthday dinner because he was sick the day of my birthday. And I'm a huge fucking foodie, and this was like an Argentinian, like, classy restaurant in San Francisco. It's called Lolinda. This is my first time ever ordering a steak at a restaurant. Bitch, every single time I took a bite, my eyes were rolling in the back of my head. It was so good.
And that wasn't because Kevin was under the table?
No.
Oh.
That was later, but but it's been a good week. I actually start school again tomorrow, so I'll be gone for a week-long retreat for school. I leave tomorrow afternoon, so no recording then, sadly. But I'm stoked to be in some nature with my classmates and friends. But
yeah, go touch some grass.
I need to. I need some grounding, some earthing. But how are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm going through this transitional period right now because I got a new job. I think I mentioned in the last episode, I got a new job, and yesterday was my last day at my prior job.
Congrats.
God, I'm so excited. Now I'm going through, I think it was like a couple episodes ago I mentioned that I was going through a reset, or I did a reset. I'm doing another reset because I think this was just a good opportunity for me to just start clean, like just fresh slate, you know what I mean? I wanted to like reset everything, not everything, not like the last reset I had. So like you can see behind me, like this is just a pile of laundry that I need to take care of. So right, that's kind of what I've been taking care of. I have a week off because I gave myself, you know what, after my last day, I'm gonna give myself a week off.
As you should. Yeah,
just to like recharge, get my social battery back up. It was a friend's birthday party yesterday, so it was really nice to see some friends. A lot of them are our friends. It was the Blast to Meet circle of friends. So it was really good to see them, and now I'm just like getting into the groove of preparing for a new environment, preparing for a new job, resetting my life just so that I can start off fresh, and use this time to just recharge. But I'm excited. That's something that that I'm very, very, I'm trying to kind of like, I just want to like live in the excitement a little bit because it's been a long time since things have changed in my life. job wise. Like I was at that prior place for 7 years, and it was just time for. I'm just excited for like just a change, change of a rhythm, change of a environment, something new, something to cultivate, something new to cultivate.
Totally.
And then Franny and I are still show prepping. We have a show in September that we're very, very excited for. It's called Market of the Beast. It's run by a friend of ours, Heather, who's based in Washington, and it's so cool. They're bringing this really incredible event to LA, and we're very, very excited. And we're actually we're actually going to be starting handcrafting our own novena candles. So we're like, this month we have no events because we're trying to like get back into the groove of like actually handcrafting everything that we make. And so, oh gosh, I'm so excited to do that. But yeah, I'm okay. I'm actually doing really well. I'm really, really excited for some stuff. But
I'm happy to
Franny,
hear that.
thank you. Franny, how are you?
I'm doing really well. The years started off very rocky for me as well. I kind of was forced to move out of my previous home, which was very heartbreaking because I loved that studio I lived in.
I did too. That was the best little studio.
It was so cute. I loved having my patio garden, and
it was so close to everything. It was so close to
right in the heart of
that we frequent.
Right there in Silver Lake. Just everything was right there. It was so perfect. So it was like a forced move situation. So I had to get out of there. Now I live, which isn't bad. It's not a bad place where I live, but I do miss living in Silver Lake a lot. I would love to move back. And yeah, there was drama. Every detail of that. Because the drama involved me, and I was. God, there was a lot happening, and outside of that, there was also a lot of things going on in my personal life. With my family and extended family, there was a lot of drama going on. So those first 2, 3, 4 months were just absolute chaos for me. And I would say in the last month or so, things really started picking up for me. I mean, V and I really started making progress and growth into our business, Vita Mortis, which if y'all don't follow, please follow on Instagram, Vita Mortis, please.
_LA.
_LA. And, I got a new job as well, just like V, about 8 weeks ago. I got a new job at a nonprofit in downtown, which I am absolutely loving. It's very, very rewarding. And my craft as well has just taken a wonderful turn, and things have really been looking up for me. It's funny because when I did a beginning of the year spread for how the year was going to turn out, like the first 5 months,
she spread her legs in front of a mirror, and then that's how she.
Yeah, and it was just pure tower.
That was her spread.
Just the tower.
It was just like a smelly, moist, greasy, skanky tower.
Yeah. Exactly. So I remember the cards that I drew were like 8 of Swords. It was like the 10 of Swords, and I think like the 5 of Pentacles, like in one spread. And I was like, God damn it! But the transformative aspect of those cards and the direction where those cards point you to, I knew that halfway through the year, things were really going to start picking up for me. And lo and behold, that process has been happening for me now for the past few weeks, where things are picking up, really starting to look bright. Obviously not immune to obstacles, but at least I have the means to get through them.
Totally. I'm happy to hear you're on the come up.
Thank you.
And she's also loves coming on.
I love being come on. Yes.
Yeah. So the come up and come on. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had a very good past 2 weeks.
I fully believe that.
I fully believe it. Listen, I've always been fully transparent on this podcast, especially with the relationship I have with my friends and with Francisco. Franny and I have gone to men's meetups and sex parties together before, and Franny is very popular. We're both very popular, but Franny is very popular.
Are. Have you noticed that every time we've gone to the sex party, we end up making friends with people?
Oh yeah, we like sit and kiki.
Yeah,
I love
we
that.
sit and kiki with people. It's really interesting, actually. This would be a really good conversation for the post show. Actually, is the cruising culture, the cruising queer culture, because I think it's something that a lot of people experience, and part of that is orgies. And they're so much fun, and it's not even just the sex, but just like meeting people and like kikiing with these people like who have like common interests. It's actually really, really interesting, and like to hear their like deepest, darkest secrets and as like why they're there, you know, it's really fun.
Yeah, and it's also nice just having someone there that can watch your back, you know.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's why. I mean, the first time I went to the men's meetup, I went by myself, but I was like, this would be so much more fun if I had friends with me.
Which is really hard for you to do in the first place.
Yeah, because I just don't have a catalog of friends. So, but like the second time or the third time I went, I brought Franny with me, and it was such a blast. We had so much fun.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Was that the one you turned the lights on by accident?
Yep.
That's the one.
That's the one. That's the place.
I wish I would have been there for that. I think I was in a different room.
I think you were too. I was in there with. We'll talk about it in the post show. So if you guys want to hear that story, please subscribe to the Patreon, and I'll put it on the post show. We'll talk about it in the post show. But we have a really, really exciting topic to talk about today. Rai, what are we talking about, and why is this smelly witch here with us?
Yeah, we're talking about brujeria, and I'm just so stoked because I don't know. I feel like that term is thrown around so much in like the spiritual social media sphere that it's kind of like lost its actual cultural like meaning in some cases. And so I'm so happy to have Franny here with us to talk about brujeria, someone of Mexican descent who can actually share what it is, how it looks like in practice. I definitely want to ask your opinion on who you consider should be able to practice brujeria in general. But yeah, that's the topic of today.
Oh, before we get into it, Franny, can you just let the audience know what your pronouns are and how you like to be addressed?
You can use whatever pronoun with me: he, she, they, it, all of the above.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Yeah, so that's the topic. Franny, can you when you were first here, we were talking about Santa Muerte, and we did kind of the topic of brujeria kind of came up, but we didn't really talk about it in depth. So for folks who are not aware, and also for me, I mean, I've seen your practice firsthand, or not firsthand, but secondhand, and we practiced together, we've crafted together, we've casted together. So I do have you know, kind of an idea of what kind of flavor your craft looks like, or what it looks like just to see your magic work. But can you give us kind of like a little maybe synopsis of like what it means, what the term means, where it comes from, and the cultural significance of it?
Sure. So brujeria, there's two meanings to brujeria. There's the literal translation of witchcraft, which can cover any cultural witchcraft that exists. It is just a literal translation. But then there is also the word, the title, brujeria, which is Mexican or Latin American witchcraft, folk witchcraft. So those two are separate in a sense. So the word brujeria can mean either or. It's an umbrella term because brujeria is such a wide net you're casting when you want to define it. There are so many spiritual practices, paths, beliefs, and cultural origins that exist within the umbrella of brujeria. So just within the context of Mexico, because that's where my family's from, like, I can't speak for the rest of Latin America, but within Mexico itself, brujeria has become this amalgamation of all these beautiful cultures and beliefs. So you have, of course, the obvious Catholicism and Christianity that made its way into Mexico through colonization. You have all of the indigenous spiritual beliefs, which there are thousands within just Mexico alone. And then you have other cultures that have made their way into Mexico over time. So you have Afro-Cuban, you have East African beliefs, you have Haitian beliefs that are being practiced in Mexico pretty commonly, Irish, German, Chinese practices. So all these cultures throughout the past 300 years have made their way into Mexico. The people immigrated over here, brought their spirituality with them, and thus it began to grow and develop within the native practices of Mexico. So everyone's practice looks different. It does vary from state to state. So in Mexico, the practice I do may look different from someone who practices from Zacatecas or Chihuahua or Guanajuato. You know, all these states, there's so many different roots that are planted in each one. So it does vary by state, by region, by culture, and then by person.
That was such an in-depth, wonderful umbrella explanation of that.
Thanks. I tried my best.
Girl, words are hard, huh?
Words are very hard.
What part of Mexico is your family from, Franny?
So my immediate family is from Baja Norte, and then I have extended family members, aunts, uncles, my grandparents that are from Chihuahua and Jalisco.
Okay. I would love to know if you're willing to share like where you learned how to do brujeria. Like was it from within your family, or were there teachers you had when you were still living in Mexico, or how did you come to incorporate that as your spiritual practice?
So the way I learned was, well, one, Mexico is so superstitious. To all my fellow Mexicans out there, you know, we are such a superstitious country. So ever since I was a little kid, I have always heard these folk tales of La Lechuza and La Bruja, the witch of the town, things like that, El Diablo, Cucuy, Chamuco. And when I have very fond memories of when I was a kid, living in Mexico, going to places like Calimax, which was our local supermarket. And a lot of these big markets have an aisle that's basically a mini botanica. So you have all your veladoras, novenas, you have saint statues, Santa Muerte statues, statues of Christ, all these wonderful, wonderful images. And I remember being like 4 or 5 years old and being in awe of these images. And growing up Christian, I grew up in a Christian household when I was around like 10 years old. That's kind of when my parents became Christian. They kind of forced us to go on that spiritual path of Christianity. So I kind of learned through that little things like, the power of prayer and reading your Bible, these little things that to this day I do. Obviously not the Bible, but I still believe in like the strength of prayer and, reading my material, all that jazz. So a lot of my practices came from things that I learned actually from my grandma, who was a Catholic, but did a lot of witchy shit when she was alive. So, things from like that my mother would tell me when she was younger, my grandma would give my mother and her brothers baths in sage, comfrey, and marijuana. So, like,
ooh, that's an expensive bath.
That's a very expensive bath. Little things like that, or doing like cabbage remedies for healing and rest. All these little things that my grandma would do where I was just like, girl, you're a witch. And when I was in my early teens, I really began to dive deep into witchcraft, and specifically Mexican witchcraft, into brujeria. So I started researching about history and Mexican brujos and really going into, folklore and things of that nature. And I spent the first 3 years of my life just researching, just learning about more of my culture, how it affected me and how I was able to connect with it living here in the US. And over time, it just began to grow and grow and grow into this practice that has now really enveloped my life and who I am as a person. A very proud Mexican practitioner. So Mexico is a very broad country. It's very big, and it has an extremely long, rich history. So it's one of those journeys where when you want to learn about brujeria, you're probably going to spend the rest of your life learning about it because there's just so much of it. So here I am 15 years later, actually. 15 years ago is when I first started practicing witchcraft officially, and I still don't know it all. I'm still learning, and I think that's the best part of the journey that I've been on.
Totally, being a lifelong student.
Mm-hmm.
It's also humbling to know, like, I don't know everything, as opposed to people who claim to know everything. That's like always been a red flag for me when people say, like, I'm a master in this.
And we know those girls. We know those who know
girls.
everything.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone ever tells you they're like a master brujo and they know it all, block them.
Unless they're like 90 years old.
A master anything, honestly. A master anything, especially within the witchcraft community, is like, you need to sit down.
Mm-hmm.
I got humbled with that once, where there was like a period of my life where I was kind of being like, ooh, shit, I'm good at this. And there was a moment where I had this like spiritual encounter where one of the spirits that I work with was basically like, claiming yourself to be a master is claiming mastery over your spirits, and you do not own that. And I was just like, ooh, girl, okay, never again.
Yeah, that's profound.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's constantly learning and developing and growing and turning into a new person moon cycle is something that I think people should really kind of, there is no end goal when it comes to practicing any sort of spiritual practice. I don't think there's, just being as well versed and practicing and being the best that you possibly can be in that moment, I think is the goal.
Yeah.
Like, just,
It's not a race.
you know, no,
It's not a race to do this. Whether you've been on your path for 30 years or you're just starting, you're not competing with anyone and you're not in a race with anyone. So take every step in just being present in the moment and take what you can in the moment. You're not in a rush.
Great advice.
Something that I want to ask, I'm pretty sure there's a lot of crossover in regards to what this topic is, but what do you find are the main differences between like Mexican folk magic and brujeria? Like, what's the main, like, where do they differ, and where do you draw the line where, like, okay, so that's Mexican folk magic, and this is brujeria, you know?
So a lot of Mexican folk magic has been practiced by people who, it can be practiced by literally anyone. Anyone in Mexico can practice folk magic without claiming the title of brujeria or even devoting themselves to a specific spiritual path. For example, there is a folk charm where you would take a red string or yarn and you would tie it one of the legs of your tables or the chairs, and it's known as like tying the devil's balls. Basically, you're binding evil, you're binding like a streak of bad luck or things like that. So people do that pretty commonly, and they're not witches. It's just a tradition that has been passed down, known to take care of simple things like that. If somebody gave you mal ojo, which is the evil eye, people will tell you, oh, just take some salt with your left hand and throw it behind you, and it'll get rid of mal ojo. So these are things that, little remedies that don't take too much of a spiritual devotion to a path or a practice, that anybody can practice. It is open to everyone. Everyone is able to join in on this. Whereas brujeria, practice of witchcraft, requires devotion. It requires a strict, disciplined, and open relationship with the spirits of Mexico. So you can see that the difference lies between the relationship that you have with the history and the spirits and the discipline that comes with it.
That's very clear cut. I have a juicy question. I would love to know your opinion on people, especially Hispanic and Latina diaspora, who claim the title of Brujo, Bruja, Brujex, versus like what that title actually means from its like Mexican and Hispanic origins.
Sure. So I always tell people, if you are of Latin origin, if your family hails from those landscapes, you can become a brujo, bruja, brujex, bruje if you are willing to do the work. And that is the big thing about brujeria, is it is a practice that demands, it requires you to take the time to dive into the history of the spirits, the history of the people, the cultures, the land that you sit on, to develop an understanding of those spirits, of those cultures. You have to have that discipline to research, to study. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody has the availability to do that. You know, they want to practice all these traditional brujeria spells like toad bindings, or, you know, magia con el sapo. Sapo is a toad. They want to work with the spirit, which is very common in brujeria, but they don't know about the spirit. They don't know the spiritual context of it, and they don't know what it means to hold a sapo in your hand, to communicate with that spirit and do the working with it. Brujeria is an intense practice. It's not lighthearted in any way. It's not meant for the Wicca woo-woo love and light people. Brujeria can be used to heal. Brujeria can be used to do all these wonderful things. So that's kind of like where that difference between Mexican folk magic and brujeria kind of lies, is, are you able to, you know, to give yourself the discipline to research that history, to connect with the spirits? And if not, you're practicing folk magic.
Which is 100% okay. We've talked about this before.
Yeah, that's totally fine.
When it comes to magic, and when it comes to practicing folk magic and actually becoming a witch and like holding that title, there is a very specific way of practicing when you call yourself a witch. We've talked about this.
A bit of a price comes with it. You know,
that's
it's
why I
like,
switched. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Franny.
oh no, you can go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's why I stopped using the title like full Catholic witch and switched it to like practitioner, because I don't really even work aligned with like those certain devotions required for witchcraft, since I mainly stick within Santa Muerte and like the Catholic pantheon. But should I venture out and actually do those things that are more in the witchcraft umbrella, I might claim that title again. But I think it's just a matter of awareness of knowing what you're claiming when you're using a title, or knowing like the context of that title and not just strapping it on.
100%.
Because it's not a loose title. That's the thing, is that the definition of what it means to be a witch is like, I'm not gonna hold it against anybody, because I was victim to it too until I learned and knew better. I always thought that you can slap the title witch on anybody just as long as they have some sort of magical practice, which is not true. I think that there are different definitions as to what it means to be a witch, but there is a very specific thing, and this is just based on what I've learned and how I practice, is that there is a very, very specific way of communicating with spirits that makes you a witch. It's a very, very it's a very close relationship. It's a constant relationship, and it's something that has to be constantly fed and maintained, and it takes a lot of work. It's not just thinking of something that you want to manifest and then putting it into a taper candle, letting it burn, and waiting for it to happen. That's definitely in some ways part of it, but that's not the bulk of it. That's not the meat of what it means to be a witch. And it like what Franny was talking about, it bleeds into every culture. That idea of the difference between folk magic and actual witchcraft, it bleeds into every culture. It's not just in Mexico. It's not just in the Ozarks. It's not just in Europe. There is a specific way of practicing, of actually considering yourself a witch. And I mean, there's this whole conversation of initiation, right? There's a conversation about, and I've spoke to some of my traditional witchcraft friends who believe that your life is there are moments in your life when that actually initiate you into practicing witchcraft, right? Not just like an actual like a ritualistic initiation with a spirit, which can happen, but also your life is an initiation into witchcraft. That's why so many queer people practice witchcraft, because their life, just going through a queer life, is within itself an initiation into witchcraft, because you find this path because you're on the fringes, you're the marginalized group of people. And witchcraft is used to survive. It's mostly for, this might be a little bit spicy, but it's mostly geared towards marginalized groups of people. I know that's not necessarily true, but like when I see like when I see folks who are, let's just say, privileged, cis,
entitled,
het, also
white,
no melanin.
I'm not holding that against anybody, but I'm just saying, like, cis het white people, why do you need witchcraft? Like, okay, you call yourself a witch all you want, but why do you need it? What are you using it for, right?
What upper hand do you need help with that you don't already get through white privilege?
Cis het white men, excuse me.
Men.
Cis het white men. What are you using witchcraft for? Okay. That's just a question I just want to throw out there. Please put it in the comments. If you are a cis het white man, please tell us, and you are a witchcraft practitioner, please tell us what you need witchcraft for. What more are you trying to gain that you don't already have? Please tell us. So,
oh my gosh,
that's a load.
I just got home from watching the Barbie movie, so I'll have, like,
how was it?
Oh, so good. So
I
camp,
keep
loved
hearing
every
that.
second. It's so
I need to watch
good.
it.
Please go watch it.
I want to go next weekend for sure.
So worth
Ugh.
it. I just love the humor, but yeah, they just talk about a lot about like patriarchy and shit. So I was just thinking
It's
about
so crazy.
male privilege and
That
shit.
was going through TikTok a couple of days ago. However, like all these fucking idiots are posting on TikTok saying like, Barbie movie is just hating on men. And I was like, I don't think that's what they're talking about. I don't think you actually really paid attention to the movie. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
like you shot and you got so close, but you got so far away. Like totally missed it. Like you saw the target, but you just totally fucking missed it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm very excited to see that. But yeah, it's this idea of the patriarchy. It's ruled by cis-het white men. You already belong to the patriarchy. You already have the world at your disposal. So why do you need witchcraft? What are you
Mhm.
using witchcraft for? But anyways,
What about your practice of brujeria, Franny? Would you be willing to share? Like, what does it look like for you? Whether it's the daily practice or a specific ritual, whatever you're comfortable sharing. Like, what does that look like for someone who's never seen brujeria be done?
So for me, and I think I speak for a good number of brujos, brujas, bruje, which by any, if it helps, for anyone that wants to use a gender neutral term for brujo or bruja, you can use brujex, which is very modern, but bruje is very commonly used in Mexico. The E is very is kind of like the more traditional non-binary term. So like le bruje would be how you would use non-binary gender neutral term for witch. For myself, I usually use bruja or brujo, but that's just me personally. For
it
me,
depends on
brujeria,
if she's tucked or not tucked. Then she knows.
yeah, how much
The E
swelling,
just rolls off the tongue better too.
Bruje.
right?
It does, doesn't it?
Bruje or
Bruje.
le bruje,
Bruje.
le bruje. For me, brujeria is a very ancestral practice, and I think that's a very common ground for all brujos everywhere. It's a very heavy ancestral practice because it is the ancestors who crafted the practice to what we know and experience today. So, in my opinion, my personal opinion, brujeria should be at the very center of it should be an ancestral practice, and if it is not, then you are denying the spirits that literally gave you your practice, that literally passed on their spiritual gifts to you. So again, in my opinion, if you're not honoring your ancestors, they are not the center point of your practice, then you are doing them dirty. Not just them, but the spirits of the land that they have also worked with that you just happen to be trying to invoke. Okay? So for me, it's very ancestral heavy. Honoring the ancestors, a daily devotion to them. You know, I'll be honest, sometimes I forget. Sometimes I forget to pray to my ancestors. Sometimes I leave out an offering too long or forget to bring offerings. It happens. We're not perfect. But your intent should always be within your ancestral practice. I mean, aside from that, the more practical things that I do are using traditional tools like tijeras, which are scissors, maracas, using huesos or bones, working with a lot of traditional Mexican plants and herbs like salvia, working with, oh my God, one of my favorites would probably have to be like albahaca, comino, perajil. You know, there's a lot you can do. There's a lot of traditional Mexican herbs and plants that are common in our practice. And again, this differs between what is available to you, where you are, whether you're here in the US or you're practicing in one of the many states in Mexico. It depends. So it's a very, very colorful practice. Voga, you have seen my altar, you have seen my home where I practice my craft. There's a lot of color going on there. There's so many colors within brujeria, and you see it in our culture. Mexico is colorful, it's rich.
And it's so the opposite of my practice. I'm just like, I want
black.
everything to be black. I was like, okay, listen, because like Franny and I, like I said, we are in business together, so like we have to design a booth, and so I wanted to reflect the two of us, right? So when you see like split down the middle, you know which side is Franny's side and which side is my side, because we have two reading tables. When you see, because we have two reading tables, and you'll know which one is which, whose is whose, because like Franny has all of these like super colorful like pashminas that she like drapes over everything, and I just want black velvet. I want, you know, like skulls and like all the like black candles and like candelabras and like like a Victorian Gothic mansion. That's what I want to look like, and it's the colors are. I've gotten used to it. It's really quite beautiful, but it's just not. It's not something that like appeals to me. Mm-hmm. But like when you see everything just pulled together, it's just like this is very. You can see the culture in it. You can really see the people, that this represents.
Mm-hmm. Which is always the goal for me in my practice. Is I want every bit of my practice to represent my, my culture, my country, my people, where my family comes from, where my ancestry hails from, and then of course just who I am as a person. I love black. Like you see in my closet, it's mostly black.
Mm-hmm.
But Brujería is a very colorful practice. It is so rich
because it's an extremely colorful culture. Like the culture is so dense in color, mm-hmm. and I'm not even just saying like physical color itself. Just the culture itself is in so many ways so colorful. It's loud. It's it's very not necessarily in your face, but it's notice me. It's very elegant. It's very flamboyant. It's very textures and just the Mexican culture is it's an amalgamation of a lot of things, I'm sure, but there's a lot of influences in that. But it really is a beautiful like look at what you're sitting next to right now. That tapestry. It's one that's right next to your dining room.
This is a huichol tapestry. It's from Jalisco.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
So that's what we're talking about. It's like the aesthetic of Francisco and the aesthetic of Voga are just they're polar opposites, but they just work. They work for some reason.
Yeah, they for some odd reason. And you see that you see that in every aspect of my country. You see it and you hear our music. Voga is listened to when I slap on Mexican music. It's
folk
loud.
Music is really beautiful.
It's colorful. And you see it in our food. Our food is same, rich, flavorful, colorful. There's no room to be boring in Brujería. Okay? There's no room to be boring. If your Brujería is plain and unseasoned, you're not a brujo. I don't know
salted
what you
chicken
want.
Breast.
Just a plain salted chicken breast, boiled chicken breast. No, there's no room for that. You need to be open to the color, the noise, and the busyness that is this practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanna kind of just really back a little bit because you mentioned Brujería being very ancestral. So something that I want to kind of touch on, because I'm assuming that because Mexico is a colonized state, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a colonized country, and the people were effectively colonized by the same group of people
Mm-hmm.
that colonized us, who were the Spaniards. I would assume that most of your ancestors were Catholic. So, what are the Catholic influences that exist, and if you're willing to share, you incorporate into your practice?
Sure. So there's not very many. There's not very many.
Well,
But
Francisco, going away from Brujería, like Francisco and I were surrounded by people who are very not Catholic, and Francisco is also not Catholic. So I just want to make that very clear that Francisco is not Catholic.
No, capital N-O. So the things that I do that do have Catholic influence are my rosaries. And that specifically really comes in practice with my devotion to La Santa Muerte, where I do hold the rosary in my hands when I'm doing prayers. I'll use it when I'm doing spell work, certain workings. I currently have the rosary around my staff to, really give it that power. And I don't really do it as much anymore, but I did used to use some Bible verses in my practice, specifically the more like violent ones from Revelations, where it's like things of like destruction, stuff like that, or like using Bible pages for certain workings. So those things, I do use novenas, which are very Catholic in nature, I've had saint statues before, but I think that's it. Honestly, there's not a whole lot. Prayer, actually, that I do believe in the power of prayer, and actually do want to give credit to my parents, whom I don't get along very well with my parents. They're very, very hardcore Christian. My grandmother was a devout Catholic, but I have seen over time how prayer can really invoke energy, can really invoke the spirits to come to you. I mean, every time I would visit my grandmother in Mexico, or even the short time that when I lived with her, every time we would leave the house, she would always recite a prayer and do a cross on me and my sisters. Every time, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. And she would do like a little prayer of like, I love you so much, be well, be healthy. I still do that. I still do a cross on myself when I pray. Now, is it necessarily like the cross for Christ? Not to me anymore. It's more of like the crossroads on my body. You know, that binding of whatever spell, whatever working I'm doing, I am binding it so that it may come to fruition. But it is still something that you see in Catholicism. It has its roots in Catholicism. So I would say those are probably the only things that I do that are Catholic.
And obviously anything that I actually incorporate into, like when we work together, like that's very Catholic. So like when Franny and I will cast together, there are aspects of both of our practices into our spell work that we actually incorporate at the same time. And you know, you'll join me while I recite the rosary.
Yeah.
Or you know, in nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti, I'll do that over you if we're about to do an event or, you know, whatever. So there is a little bit of like, you know, kind of carryover into, because you know Mexico is a very, like, just like the Philippines, it's a very Catholic, very Jesus centered culture. So as much as we like to delineate from any of those things, like, it's kind of difficult because because just the way the world works now, everything has its roots in Christianity. Something can be rooted to Christianity because it was very effective in taking over the world. So
very much so. Which if anyone is wondering, do you need to practice Catholicism or Christianity to practice Brujería? You do not, by all means. You just don't have to. But it is important to know that is a part of the culture, and even though it was brought on to my country through horrible means, through genocidal, violent means, over time the people have become conditioned to it. It's become now a part of the daily norm. So if you don't want to practice Catholicism or Christianity, you don't have to. But if you choose to, also don't feel guilty about it, because you practicing Catholicism or Christianity within the context of Brujería does not mean that you support the institution that is responsible for my people's, you know, genocide.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Franny, but I feel like, I don't know if we talked about this in the Santa Muerte episode you were a guest on, like way back when, but didn't you like used to be reluctant about using any Catholic aspects in your practice? And like, if so, like when did that transition? Like, what caused you to then begin incorporating that?
Voga's like me. Yeah, it would be more from Voga, actually. Voga did influence a lot of like my, you know, that Catholic bringing into my my practice. Because pretty much before Voga stepped in, I never really uttered the words Jesus.
And ruined her life.
She ruined my
life.
Ruined my practice.
As she does best.
Yeah, it's what I'm really good at.
And now I'm a devout Christian woman of God, thanks to her.
Yeah.
So Voga did really bring that into my life. I mean, I never really touched a rosary before Voga came into my life. I kind of used them with my grandma, but that was really it. And, you know, things like that Voga has influenced my life. And I thought, okay, like, I can use this without feeling guilty, because I know this isn't supporting the institution. This is what I'm using to connect with my spirits. So there's that aspect. Specifically when it comes to my relationship to La Santa Muerte, I don't really have much Catholic ties with her. I mean, one, canonically, the church rejected her, so she is not a canonical Catholic spirit, although there are people that can venerate her through the Catholic lens, which is totally fine.
Yeah, because there. I mean, we talked about this before. How people who are devotees of Santa Muerte are
Catholic.
some of them
Yeah,
are Catholic.
A lot of,
Yeah.
I would say most in Mexico have Catholic or Christian practices along with their devotion to Santa Muerte. But, you know, for myself, I have found means, and I found a very steady and stable practice with La Santa Muerte without making it centered around Christianity or Catholicism. But again, that is just me personally. Every bruje is different. There are Catholic brujes, there are Christian brujes, and there are some that are pure, they practice purely the old indigenous practices, which at that point, many of them don't even call themselves brujos anymore. There are many other words now, curanderos, chamanes, a plethora of titles that they can take.
I have an interesting question that I don't think has been asked before. At least I haven't heard this question. We were talking about, in our last episode, we talked about ancestral veneration. And we're talking about how, you know, like, let's say, for example, you were adopted. And let's say, for example, just for the sake of this conversation, someone who is white was adopted into a Mexican family, and they wanted to start working with the ancestors of their adoptive family, and they become interested in brujeria. How do you see someone who isn't necessarily, their bloodline doesn't line up with Mexican culture, or their origins isn't Mexican, like it's more European or anything like that, or even just because you mentioned that brujeria is more like it's very ancestor driven, right? So how do you feel about folks who, one, maybe are part of an adoptive family, who want to explore their adoptive family's ancestry and then practicing brujeria, or someone who isn't Mexican and it doesn't come from a Mexican background practicing brujeria?
So there's a lot I can say about that. And again, these are just my opinions. It is not like an official rule or anything. This is just what I think. I'm pretty sure there are other brujas out there that may think differently. For me, brujeria is firstly reserved to the people of, and this is specifically just Mexican brujeria, specifically to the people that do come from that culture. We have first dibs, and I think anyone can agree on that. We have first dibs on our own culture, on our own spiritual practices, and our own ancestors. Now, is brujeria a quote-unquote closed practice? There's a little bit of a middle ground there, because if you're someone who is not from this culture, you're not from this country, you don't have lineage with this country, it can be difficult to connect with it when you didn't have a proper upbringing in it. If you don't speak the language, you don't know that much about the history, the language, the food, the music. If you're not too familiar, it's going to be pretty difficult to connect with those spirits, because a lot of our spirits are celebrated and venerated through the food, through the music, through the many languages and dialects that exist within just Mexico alone. So you would have to put in a lot of time and effort to really get the hang of brujeria and to honor those ancestors. Now, Mexicans in nature are very welcoming people. We are very welcoming people. We want people to know about our culture, our history. We want you to celebrate our holidays with us and to be a part of who we are, and as contributors to the human race. But if you choose to go down that route, you have to understand you need to learn about our ancestors. Our ancestors can be willing to adopt you into our culture. We are willing to bring you in and teach you, but you got to be willing to learn and to accept things as we give them to you. Don't enter the path of brujeria wanting to influence it, because already you are entering with the colonizer mindset of, I'm going to bring my ideas into brujeria. No. Vice versa. Let our ancestors bring their ideas, their experiences into your practice. That it's a very thin line. It's one or the other. One works, one will not work.
That's a perfect segue into the question I had for you, Franny, is like, whether it's for research purposes or someone who actually wants to begin to go down the path of brujeria or at least incorporate it into their practice, what are any sources you would recommend, be it books, videos, online courses, teachers, whatever you can recommend?
Sure, there are so many. There really are a lot. Now, brujeria is not as common and not as really open out there as, for example, like European paganism, as Wicca, as all these other practices that you see, the very white practices that are still the majority within online spaces like Instagram, TikTok, things like that. Brujeria is starting to really make its presence known in those spaces. So I'm hoping more people begin to engage and to really put it out there who we are as practitioners. The best way to practice brujeria is pure experience. You have to get there and experience. Now, I'm not saying move to Mexico, transplant, and spend the rest of your life there. Not at all. But connect with the people. Look at the history of our food. Listen to our music. What is our music saying to you? Talk to the people who have immigrated from Mexico to here, to the US. Talk to those people and listen to their experiences. The thing with brujeria is you can read all the books you want, which I'll name some right now. But you have to understand is that brujeria is an experience. It is an amalgamation of experiences. Experiences that are blessings and experiences that come from suffering. You have to be able to listen to both and be willing to experience both. Any book on brujeria that you read, at least any credible one in my opinion, is going to be a mix of blessing and baneful. Good and evil and everything in between. It is neutral. So if you're looking for someone, look for those green flags. I think if it's too one-sided or the other, it's a little bit of a red flag for me. It also varies where you are from. So for example, brujeria from Texas may look different from brujeria from California. It may look different from Nevada, Arizona, Colorado, all these states that used to belong to Mexico. And same people from Mexico, like I mentioned earlier before, somebody from Yucatan may be practicing differently from someone from Sinaloa or Veracruz or Baja Sur. It changes. So there's not one set path. But one of my favorite people would have to be City Alchemist. I love City.
I knew they were going to come up. They were definitely going to come up in this conversation
City
for
Alchemists are absolutely fantastic. Please give them a follow and show them some support. They have wonderful knowledge. That Mexican Texas magic. Which, if people are wondering what's the difference between Mexican American brujeria and traditional Mexican brujeria, they come from the same place. People try to differentiate them and say, oh no, they're totally different. No, they're not. Mexican American brujeria is brujeria practiced on land that used to belong to Mexico. So it's all Mexican. Sorry. If anyone disagrees, you're wrong. Some of my favorite books, which, Rai, I know you're quite the fan of, would have to be Magia Magia. Magia is wonderful, and then there's Blood of Brujeria. These books are... When I read these books and saw and read some of the shit that I grew up hearing about and have practiced myself, I felt so represented. These books really give you a dive into the spirits that we work with and the magic that we work with. And I will say, especially with Blood of Brujeria, not for the faint of heart. If you are love and light, wicca wicca woo, these books are not wicca woo.
Wicca wicca woo woo.
These books are not for you. They represent brujeria perfectly. There's love, there's prosperity and protection, and then there's also blood and workings to unalive someone. That's the nature of brujeria. I mean, and outside of these books, there are spells and workings that involve, animal sacrifice that are still practiced today. Human sacrifice, not unaliving someone, but sacrificing your blood, sacrificing a limb. These still actually do exist. I would say aside from those books, Erika Buenaflor, absolutely wonderful. Now, I don't think she identifies as a bruja. She is a curandera, which is a very common practice in Mexico. Curandera or curanderismo, is the art of Mexican folk healing. They are the healers of Mexico. If that's a practice that you'd be interested in, I highly recommend reading literally anything by Erika Buenaflor. The cleansing rites of curanderismo, absolutely wonderful. And then there's animal medicine, which I absolutely love because I work very heavily with animal spirits, as they are also considered the ancestors of the land. So definitely a good book to read. You will see a lot of traditional Mexican books in some rare spaces online. If you go to Mexico, you'll see these books. If you go to botanicas, you'll find some of these books. But they're really small books, kind of written by random people. This is Magia Folk Mexicana, Rituales, Conjuros y Purificaciones by Enriquez González Rubio Montoya. I know, the name is long. Which is just a book of Christian-based magic. A lot of these spells in here are Christian-based. So it was really interesting for myself to read, who is not a Christian, but seeing how I was able to incorporate this into my craft as well. So
she had to sit in the shower and have the shower running because she kept bursting
exactly.
into
I was sweating like a whore in church. I sweat like that is anywhere.
Which, if she walked into church, she would be a whore in church. So
yeah, a handy under the pulpit.
Handy under the
pulpits are so large.
A glory hole confessional.
A confessional. But I think those pulpits are so big. Preacher's hiding someone underneath, and it's fine. It's totally fine. So
most of the time they're underaged,
and most of the time they're underaged. Where's the lie? If you want to look for somebody online, I highly recommend. I think, and I may be mispronouncing her name, but it's Janelle Langoria. She is a Santa Muerte devotee on YouTube, and I think she's probably, I think from what I've seen, like the biggest YouTuber that does videos on Santa Muerte, Mexican folk magic, and things of that nature. She's I think from what I remember, a Mexican-American person. I think she's from Texas, if I'm not mistaken. So definitely check her out. From what I've seen in her videos, she's not from Mexico. I think she was born and raised in Texas, learning Spanish. And I know there's a lot of people out there that may be of Mexican descent, but maybe they're 4th, 5th, 6th generation Mexican, and they don't really speak Spanish anymore. They're not too familiar with the culture. I think she's a really great resource to get your foot in the door. If you want to learn about folk magic versus straight up brujeria. And of course, if you're devoted to Santa Muerte, you want to learn about Santa Muerte, she's also a wonderful resource. And history books. Read history books. Oh my God, I cannot get enough about that. Even if they're history books from like school, just read a history book. Read about the history of our colonization. Read about the history of Mexico before colonization. Who were the Olmecas, las Aztecas, Maya? Who were these people and how they were able to spread into thousands and thousands of other wonderful indigenous cultures. You know, the history is very diverse and rich. Learn about how Mexico had so much Chinese influence within our practice. When Chinese communities migrated to Mexico, when the Irish came, when the Germans came, when Haitian people, when African people came. Learn about that history. Believe me, it may seem like a boring history textbook, but you'd be surprised how much that influences your magic and how that opens you up to learning about the spirits and our ancestors. These are our ancestors.
That's a great list of resources. How do you feel about American Brujería by J. Allen Cross?
You can be 100% transparent. This is a safe space.
Okay. I will say this. How do I put this? So when I first did a review on American Brujería, I think I posted about it like on my YouTube and Instagram. I think I gave it a B.
Didn't the two of you do a live about it years ago? And Rye? No, the two of you.
Oh, I think we might have. Yeah.
You
guys, the two of you did a live together.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, it's all coming back to me. At my age, we just kind of tend to forget everything.
Speak for yourself.
We support our senior citizens here.
She's just starting, Franny. She's just starting her Saturn return. She doesn't understand yet.
Oh, okay.
You'll know when you get to my age, dear.
Mm-hmm. I mean, ask Voga. She's been there for a long time already.
I can tell.
My Saturn return was like 600 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm just talking about your age, honey. So I gave it a B. And I think I was being nice. I think I was being very nice with that B. Now, I like what the book stood for, you know, for people that are mixed, Mexican American, and they want to learn about Brujería. I think that is a wonderful foundation for that book. Absolutely wonderful. And Jay is a very credible practitioner. They've been practicing for quite a long time. So and outside of that, I don't really know too much about the practice because we haven't really had much communication. But what I will say about that book is read it for yourself and see how you like it. The Santa Muerte chapter was a disgrace. It was an utter disgrace in my opinion. Reading that chapter was like a knife in my heart. You know, it really hit a soft spot when he made Santa Muerte seem classist. When he said if two Santa Muerte devotees go head to head, who is Santa Muerte going to pick? And he said, well, whoever has the bigger offering. So a rich Santa Muerte devotee is always going to have the upper hand over someone who's living in poverty. Way to make her classist.
Interesting.
So that to me was like, that is not who Santa Muerte is. She is for the poor. She is for the marginalized people. So that kind of made it seem like Santa Muerte was unreachable for people that are in a financially tough space. So that's just one point. The book is very heavily Catholic. So if it makes it feel like this is Brujería, is Catholicism, which is false in every sense of the word. Again, like I mentioned earlier, you can practice Brujería through the Catholic lens, 100%. But I thought the book kind of lacked the ability to properly state you don't have to be a Catholic, and this, you know, these aren't the only ways. And then also the whole, like, I coined the term of Mexican American Brujería. Like, did you though? Because I've heard that term plenty of times when I was growing up. Nobody coined Mexican American Brujería. No one created that. That is something that was amalgamated over time. So there, with all that set aside, there are some good spells in there. The chapter on La Virgen de Guadalupe, I thought that was a very rich, enriching chapter. As someone who also prays to La Virgen de Guadalupe, chapter, fantastic. Do I think it is a proper doorway to Brujería? Not necessarily, but I also don't want to gatekeep someone from reading the book. Read it for yourself and create your own opinion. These are just my opinions as another Mexican. But again, just to reiterate, I do believe in the foundation that he was trying to create, to reach out to the people who have been disconnected from that culture. It is a good stepping stone, but I think the more you grow into your brujeria, you're probably going to step out of that stage soon. That's my opinion. So I'd probably give it like a B- or a C.
Thank you for that opinion and that lens in which to see the book. I agree with the Santa Muerte chapter. It was definitely my thing was that he reached out to other devotees for information on Santa Muerte, and I'm like, for me personally, I wouldn't write chapters on a subject that I don't personally partake in.
Yes,
it should have been included. It should have just been included. It probably shouldn't have been in the book at all.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And to anyone wondering, this doesn't discredit who Jay Allen is as a practitioner. Again, I don't know what their practice looks like, but just from the book itself, but again, I can't judge their entire practice or who they are as a person just because of this one book. They still have plenty of good resources available.
Coming from an outside perspective, I read the book, and for me, for my practice, it's a wonderful foundation, especially in folk Catholicism. It has a really, really great. I really loved the book when I first read it because the Santa Muerte. It didn't occur to me that it was in any way disrespectful or lacking in any way, because I never considered myself working with La Santa Muerte. But the rest of the book is rooted. There's a lot of conversations on folk Catholicism that I think is really, really important. So I think that if you do want to kind of dip your toes into like the like the Mexican lens of folk Catholicism, especially here in the United States. I think it's a really good foundation, because that a lot of the things that I read in that book, I actually performed, and they were very, very effective, and I still perform now. Like the talisman consecration that that Jay has in that book, I still do it now. I set shit on fire, and I put three taper candles around a talisman, and that's how I consecrate them, you know. And that came from, I mean, I sprinkle a little bit of my own flavor into it, but that the foundation of that spell was from that book. So it is a good foundational book in my opinion. In regards to it being actually like a brujeria book, I can't speak on that because I don't practice. Yeah.
Agreed. Everything Voga said, I do agree. I would say if I could, I would just rename it Catholic Mexican American folk magic. Because to me, reading the book, that's what it sounded like Catholic Mexican American folk magic versus brujeria.
And I also understand that J. Allen Cross is a folk Catholic practitioner, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Correct.
Yeah.
So it does match up.
Yeah.
So that's my opinion on the book.
No, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I'm partial. I love Jay. I agree with everything you brought up, Franny, and you as well, Voga. I can't vouch for their products though. I've bought products from them. I've also had tarot readings from them, so they are a pretty legit practitioner. So please don't let our opinions.
They're very well seasoned.
Yeah, don't let our opinions on what we perceived as not good in the book dissuade you from reaching out to Jay for any services, because that's not what we're trying to convey.
Yeah, it's just an opinion on a book.
That's not fair. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's not fair to base an opinion on a book that a very successful book that Jay wrote.
Yeah.
And kind of conflate it with their practice because you disagree with it. You know,
Lord knows how the internet is.
Yeah, I know.
Exactly. Please don't go to Jay's page and say anything or start influencing our opinions to your opinion.
Also,
experience it yourself.
Not just Jay, anyone. Like, just don't do that. Like, read the book, have an opinion, and then when people ask, give your opinion. But don't everyone needs to calm down. Like, calm
your titties.
Yeah, we don't need all of this
touch grass, eat a granola bar.
Touch grass. Have a corona.
Like, no one needs to hear your opinion when it's not asked for. I think that's the downfall of what the internet has become, is that everyone believes or everyone thinks that their opinion should be heard. I'm just like, just keep it to yourself until you're asked. You know?
Yeah. No one's asking for your opinion unless
someone actually asks for it. Yeah.
Nobody is asking, and nobody cares to hear it.
Like, just wait for someone to ask you before you actually open your goddamn mouth. Okay. Franny, do you have anything else to add before we move on to the post show?
Sure. I mean, if there is anyone listening, which there's going to be.
If there's anyone listening, fuck you.
The two people that are listening, it's Ryan, probably. To the hundreds and thousands of people that are going to be listening to this, and to the thousands more in the future.
Oh, amen.
I have to, again, I'm someone that loves to repeat himself because I love hearing my own voice.
Makes one of us.
Makes one of us. This podcast is immaculate. It brings on some of the best speakers that I have heard, some of the greatest practitioners, most authentic, real practitioners on here. So again, if you are listening to this podcast for the first time, start from episode 1 and read up. You will not be disappointed by the plethora of information. It's beautiful. There's nothing like it. And I'm not just saying that again because I'm your friends. Because we're not friends to begin with. So
yeah, I was like, we're not even friends.
We're not friends. We're not even friends. To anybody that wants to learn about brujeria, and especially if you don't come from this culture, talk to us. Talk to us. We, again, Mexicans, we're so open. We're very welcoming,
especially
people.
Franny.
I'm so open.
So welcoming.
So open to literally anyone or anything, especially if you have cash.
You'll get used to the smell.
You'll get used to the smell. God, hate you so much. You are welcome to learn about our practice. I don't want to make anyone feel gatekept. You're welcome to learn about my practice. Is that the same of actually picking it up and doing it? Yes, that is different. But I do highly recommend you learn about my culture, learn about my country, my people, and how we approach our spirituality. Learn about the spirits that we work with. I mean, learn about Santa Muerte, San La Muerte, Xochipilli, el Angelito Negro, Jesús Malvado. Learn about all these spirits. And if you are existing outside of this culture and you do want to dip your toes into brujeria, speak to a brujo, speak to a bruja, a bruje. Read the books, but talk to an authentic practitioner. Like I said, we're pretty open with the knowledge that we have. We'll give you what we know and help you get it. How to do things the right way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. And also thank you for coming on with us.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course. Always. If you ever have anything that you want to talk about, please let us know, and we'll more than welcome to come on the show.
Hey, well, remind me to unblock you though.
Yeah. I'll just remember that part. But for anyone who hasn't yet done so, we are actually about to move to the post show, which is a Patreon exclusive show that we have, where we just talk in Kiki for an extra 30 minutes. So you get an extra 30 minutes with the red text and our lovely guest Francisco. You can join the coven at patreon.com/the red text, and we have different tiers that offer different benefits. Please go and choose the tier that resonates with you the most. It's so much fun. We have monthly rosary circles, which our next one is actually coming up, most likely next week. Where we actually do a live rosary circle where everyone comes together. We go through a rosary, we check in with each other, we talk about how everyone's doing. It's a wonderful, it's personally my favorite benefit. And we also do the post show, which is just extra content that you can consume. So yeah, please go and subscribe, become part of the coven.
Thank y'all for joining us for another Unholy Communion with the Red Text. I'm your co-host Rai, aka the Mestizo Mystic on Instagram.
And I'm your other co-host Voga, and I am Voga Ilumicente.
And I am Francisco, soon to be El Brujo de la Guadaña.
And we'll see you all on our next Unholy Communion.
Bye!
Bye. Adios.